Sherry O'Donnell. I'm running for Congress, but I was in New York City when COVID was at its peak. And let me share with you first how that happened. But I want to thank Michelle for inviting me here tonight, and I want to invite you guys for being here. So a Friday a year ago in March, I was minding my own business at my office, and I get this phone call. And Friday afternoon, I don't see patients. I try to do administrative things. And in that phone call, it went something like this. Dr. Sherry O'Donnell, yes, we understand you do disaster relief. Yes, how can I help you? Well, we would like to know if you want to go to New York City. If I want to go to New York City. Most people were leaving New York City at that point. Nobody was coming to New York City. And I said, can I ask what this is about? And they said, yes, you do disaster relief. I said, I do disaster relief, but explain to me what you're really asking. And she said, we need doctors to go to New York City. At that point in time, I'd done exactly what everybody else in the nation was doing, glued to the TV when I could, and I saw that there were 34 patients an hour dying. And those trucks, those patients that I've had opportunity to treat have not landed in the hospital. And every one of them, praise God, have recovered without any sequelae. I want to share one of the things that happened that it so breaks my heart, but I'm glad she had the outcome that she did. So this patient came into my office and very quickly was identified she was very sick. And before we have a whole protocol. If a COVID patient doesn't come in the front of the exam room, they go through the back door and so on. But this patient came in, and before we could even get her to the exam room, she passed out. Well, I didn't have time to run for my PPE and run for my mask. I had to take care of the patient. We got her in the exam room, got her up. I tried to put her in Trendelenburg. If any of you are medical, you may know that that means you're up like this so you don't pass out. We got her in Trendelenburg. Her blood pressure was all over the place, going very high, very low. Her pulse was all over the place, going very high and very low. Her husband is standing there feeling and seeming helpless. My staff and I were in there. I tried to take care of the COVID patients and limit the exposure to my staff even, but we were both in there because I needed her help. At one point I had her legs up on my shoulders. Another point I was up in her face and said, hey, stay with me, don't pass out again. And I had the ammonia salt up in her nose. I knew before she got tested that she was COVID positive. I called the ambulance. My office is 3 miles from the hospital, but she was close enough I needed to call the ambulance. Called the ambulance. They brought her to the hospital. When I spent time with the husband and prayed with me before he left, I said, Don, I'm not certain she's gonna pull through this. She's really critical. And I said, what I can tell you is if she does, she's going to be in ICU. And in the ICU, you'll not be allowed to see her. But we need to be praying, we need to believe in the best for her. And he left. Now we're watching on the computer to see what's happening with her. She's very critical. Suddenly we see flash across the screen, discharged. I thought, I'm thinking she passed away. Because they don't, they'll put discharge because it doesn't, I mean, they're not gonna put on the computer how they discharge, that they're just no longer in the hospital. And I saw the word discharge come across the screen. I'm like, oh no. And I'm thinking she passed. When I could stop seeing morning patients long enough to call her husband, I called her husband and expecting him to tell me what had happened. And instead he said, yeah, Doc, we're home. I said, excuse me? He said, we're home. I said, we, you mean as in both? He said, yes, we're home. They sent us home and said if she gets worse, to come back. And I said, no, wait a second. How did they treat her? Well, they didn't. Well, what medications did they give to her? Well, they didn't. And I said, okay. And I called in the treatment protocol that I use with my patients. 2 days later, this lady that was passing out of my office, not keeping her blood pressure up, her heart rate was going all over the place, was back in my office, looking as healthy as any one of us in this room. But we're not treating properly, we're not doing things properly, and there is treatment effective treatment, inexpensive treatment. Early treatment is critical, just like influenza. If you've had influenza in the past, the common flu, influenza, you've probably been given Tamiflu. Tamiflu is an effective medication as long as you use it the first 72 hours. Patients with COVID have a better outcome when they're treated early. Doesn't mean they don't have any outcome and a good outcome, but it is a little prolonged. So what I found in the earlier patients that they give the treatment, the less likely they are to require hospitalization and the quicker they are to get through the virus. Please remember, 99.6% of the patients in the most critical category of patients, the elderly and the infirmed, those with comorbidities, 99.6 are successfully getting through COVID without any sequelae. 99.6. Means we're not having an uptick in so many deaths, and yet it doesn't take much to change the numerator and denominator and make it look bad. 99.6% of the patients in the highest risk category are still effectively treated and effectively get through this. So, vaccinations, like everything else, the science of the vaccinations have been absolutely all over the place. But before I share my well-researched convictions on the vaccines, let me preface it by saying I'm not an anti-vaxxer. Some of you in the audience are my patients. Okay? I'm offering the flu vaccine every day when patients are coming in. I'm suggesting the shingles vaccine. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. But I won't take the jab, nor will I give the jab. Based on not only the science that's out there and the research that's been supported for this, but on my personal experience in my office, I've had 2 deaths from the COVID vaccine. I've had one patient with pulmonary embolism, which is a blood clot in the lung, 1 patient that had a DVT, 2 patients that started having seizures after the COVID vaccine, 1 head injury because she passed out, so bad that they thought she was going to have a subdural hematoma. They kept her in the ICU overnight. Instead, she had 9 staples. And a total of, inclusive of that lady, 9 patients that passed out. So I'm saying that this is something that I personally have witnessed in my office. I'm one doctor with a limited practice. So why am I against this vaccine? First off, 8 of 10 companies have originally come up with the vaccine, have used aborted fetal tissue in the vaccine. That is truth. That is out there. That is known. Okay. One of the remaining 2 have used the aborted fetal tissue in the development of their vaccine. It also has messenger RNA in the vaccine. We've never used messenger RNA in the vaccine because it never passed the animal stages of those studies because the lab animals died. I'm well aware of a person that was a lab technologist and involved in the vaccines, went to the same school that I did in my medical school training. She'd been with that lab for 19 years. When it was mandated that they would have to get the vaccine, she turned in her licensure, turned in her keys, and said, I'm no longer doing this. She'd been involved in the research for 19 years. The vaccines have the spike protein in it. Hence the name of the virus, corona, meaning crown. If you don't know, that's where it comes from, it's crown. The spike protein damages the endothelial tissue and deposits in major organs, and hence we're seeing the multi-system organ failure. What do I mean by that? We're seeing patients that have impacts in their brain, in their heart, in their kidney, in their lung. It is multi-system. Why? Because it's being traveled through the endothelial system and the vascular damage is being done with the blood vessels. I said when I was at the stand at Michigan last time that when I was in New York City, I clearly understood and I was aware of the whole process, the physiologic process that was going on with COVID, such that I actually came up with a treatment protocol and a research protocol. Research, especially in big hospitals, like New York City Health and Hospitals, you've got to go through a whole process, I'll put it that way, a whole process to be approved for research. When I submitted my 50-page typed research protocol, it was accepted immediately, and I was granted an IRB immediately. The Director of Research and Development said, I will hand carry this personally. This can be a game changer. It was submitted, it was accepted. We got to the point of my attorney looked at it because it was considered intellectual property. The hospital's attorney looked at it, we were in agreement. And then they came back and said, now who's your sponsor? I said, excuse me? They said, who's your sponsor? I said, I'm a sponsor. They said, well, you need a sponsor. I said, I don't have a sponsor, what does that mean? Well, she said, who's paying for this? And I said, well, New York City Health and Hospitals. And she said, no, we can't, it's a conflict of interest. Well, I'm flying back and forth to New York City and treating here. I'm going out on Friday, working Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night, coming back to the office, flying back Monday and in the office Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, flying out again. Time to find a sponsor. So I made a couple of phone calls, community here, made a couple of phone calls to plasma centers, and I made a couple of phone calls to Fred Upton's office and a couple other offices, and nobody could and would get behind this. So that research still sits in New York City. The longer that we've been out now, a year and a half later, what I proposed is actually what is being seen, the physiology of what's happening with COVID. So I think I have a pretty good grasp on COVID and what's happening and how it needs to be treated. But I believe that the vaccines as they stand are magnificent. Because yes, some of the vaccines are causing damage, are shown in our young people to show significant uptick in myocarditis and inflammation of the heart and heart disease. But having said all of that, I think we should still be allowed the choice. As you ponder your risk and you ponder your thoughts, do you want to be vaccinated or not, you should be allowed the choice, and that shouldn't be a divisive thing between you and your family, you and your neighbor, you and your coworker. If you want the vaccine, please do. I'll respect that. But in the same token, please respect that I won't get the vaccine. But some of this divisiveness and mandates that are being shoved down our throats is craziness. And we, the people, need to stand up and say, you know what? No, I have a right to choose for myself. That's what's been taken away. That's what I'm vehemently against. And that's what I'm saying. We cannot stand for that. We cannot allow that. There's so many of the rights being taken away from us on every level. Why am I running for Congress? Because the year and a half through this, I'm realizing our nation and we, the people, are getting our rights taken time and time again, ways and ways again. You know, I said in my kickoff, because, you know, I'm a patriot through and through. Okay? I'll start crying when I hear some of the patriotic music. As a matter of fact, yesterday I was at Lest We Forget, and sitting there listening to some of the music, listening and seeing some of the soldiers that have gone before us, some of the military men and ladies that have fought and paid the ultimate price. But as I'm looking at our nation and saying, we can't keep going like this. We can't keep doing this. And that's when, a year ago, I felt the first conviction to run for office. And I was just thinking, that's like, I'm not a politician, I'm a physician. But I can tell you, I hear the voice of we the people. When I sit there and I listen to patient after patient, 20 to 23, 24 patients a day, I hear what's bothering your heart. And I don't only mean with my stethoscope. I hear from the patients that they haven't been able to see family. I hear from the patients that they're concerned about losing their jobs. I hear from patients that they're thinking they may have to move, but where would they move to? Because this state is mandating and this state is mandating because it's become a federal mandate. A lot of the nurses have called me and said, Doc, what are we going to do if we're made to leave the hospital? They've been nurses for 15, 20, 30 years and being made to leave their careers. I had a patient this afternoon tell me that, stop and think about this in and of itself. Most careers will take an average of 4 to 8 years to train. You've got college, you've got experience, you've got whatever. In the medical, it's even longer than that. Went to school, 12 years. Okay? If you have 2/3 of the workforce leaving because they've been mandated to take a vaccine, where are we gonna be? He said it's down to it's down to 2/3 of the population are going to be leaving the workforce. 2/3. Imagine the financial and economic implication it's going to have, let alone the infrastructure of who's going to be running the hospitals, who's going to be teaching our kids, who's going to be the engineers working at Whirlpool and the other places. We're imploding. We're imploding. And I don't think we as a country can afford to do that. But I said I'm a patriot because, in September when we celebrated or honored, I don't know if it's celebration, but honored 9/11, everyone in this room will remember where you were on 9/11 when you found out that the Twin Towers had been bombed, that we as a nation were attacked. I remember clearly. I was on my rollerblades and a friend called me because I was going home. I was riding my rollerblades and I came in and she seemed like Chicken Little that we were bombed, and look, you gotta turn on the TV. And she was in hysteria. But all of us remember that clearly. But I want to challenge you to remember 9/12. Because what was 9/12 like? On 9/11, I spent 18 hours trying to see if I could go to New York and help. I called every which way that I knew. I called the hospitals. I have an aunt that still lives in New York, and I called her. I called everywhere. Disaster, you don't just simply valiantly go. You've got to be part of the infrastructure, ground zero. You've got to be somebody that's on the ground, that's working those logistical pieces with you. But I spent 18 hours trying to go because I wanted to help. And unfortunately, what the hospitals were telling me is, there's no survivors, we don't need your services. No one's coming out alive. So I thought, well, let me flip hats. Let me put my ministerial hat on. I'm ordained. Let me see if they need me. Too many people, too many things. And they didn't. But when I remember 9/11, I don't remember where I was and what I was doing. But I remember that night I worked in the ER. And I usually have the opportunity to pray with patients as we're done. And every patient was, oh, pray for our nation. Pray for our nation. It wasn't self-centered prayer. It was, oh, I need this and I need that. It was pray for our nation. 9/12 was amazing because we stood arm in arm. We stood toe-to-toe. We said, you know what? My neighbor's my neighbor. I'm going to take care of my neighbor. We stood proud as a nation. We stood for the glory. And we stood proud, proud, proud patriots. And we covered for our neighbor. Martin Luther King said, I dream, and I have a dream, but I dream of a nation that returns to 9/12. Because 9/12 was when we regarded one another. We were proud and we loved one another. And we didn't fight over the color of your skin. We didn't fight over a vaccine, whether you were or not. We didn't fight over a mask. We didn't fight. We stood united. We trusted our governmental leaders. We trusted those that were giving us the information as we got it. And we were stayed tuned to the TVs, listening for the news, praying for those in authority, praying for our nation, and we cared about one another. Family took on new meaning. We filled our churches, and we prayed for God to protect and heal our land. And I see this pandemic is bringing us back to those things. Because why are you here? Because you're ready to stand up and say no more. We're ready to stand up and say no more. But I see the pandemic is bringing us back to those things that matter the most. And I see a generation once again standing up for what is right and saying, I am an American and I am proud to be an American. And no, you're not taking down our nation. And we're not going to have the tyrannical edicts stripping our rights away and causing us to be divided. The Pledge of Allegiance says, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That means all. And that's the nation I'm fighting for. That's the nation that you're fighting for. And I see us getting back to a 9/12. I'm Dr. Sherry O'Donnell, and I'm counting on your vote for Congress. Michelle, I don't know what you had planned, but if there's anybody that has any questions, I'm certainly. I can't take questions. Yes.
You know, there's a lot of money that was given to from government to our schools for COVID money. Where is it? What was it spent on? Who's accountable? That's what I want my congressman to ask, congresswoman to ask. Where is the money? Why are all the schools are not being disinfected? What's going on?
That is
Do you pay your deficit off with it?
That is a great question, of which right now is above my pay level, but those are some of the things that I will be clearly investigating. Some of you may know that I've been down at some of the school boards, and I think it started with our health department throwing the schools under the bus, in my opinion. First the health departments were making those mandates, and then when money was involved, they stepped down and they said, no, now the school districts can make their own decisions. Okay? How wrong of that? Either they're going to stand by a mandate that they made, or they're going to revoke the mandate. But to say, we're going to revoke it, but now we're putting it on you, I think that was extremely unfair of the schools.
Well, you know, it's very good. One good thing that came out of this was disinfecting our schools.
Yes.
That should have been done well before.
Absolutely.
How many school districts closed because of flu?
Absolutely.
So that's a good thing if it's being done. That's the big question.
Yes, universally it's not, that's right. Universally it's not being done at the schools.
Yeah.
And I think there's a whole lot of people being called to task and trying to find some of those things out. So, great question. And I wish I had a clear answer.
Well, you understand, I want someone in Congress who's going to do something.
Yes, ma'am. That's why I believe I'm your candidate. Okay? And I'll tell you in just a second, for several reasons. I really am kind of a boots on the ground kind of gal, okay? Just not only do my missions experience speak to that, okay? I see a disaster and I run to the disaster. New York was imploding upon itself. Yes, I went. Haiti in August had an earthquake. Hardly anybody knew there was an earthquake in Haiti because it suddenly went from Haiti and the earthquake to Afghanistan. I was on ground in 6 days with a fully equipped medical team ready to serve the people. I will take that same attitude that I've taken to 34 different countries, mostly in disaster relief, and get her done. Yes?
I can just piggyback on her good question about where did the money go and where did the money come from and how was it routed? Because back last year, I started watching the behavior of the Berrien County Commissioners. Are there any Berrien County Commissioners present here tonight? Because if there were, I would say, why did you continue to receive CARES Act money? Your county commissioners have continued to receive CARES Act money, which is the fund that goes for COVID relief under an emergency. And I am aghast that I emailed our local fellow here and I addressed him by name at the health department meeting that some of us got together and attended back in, I think it was September.
September.
We went there.
Was that Thursday morning?
Yes, ma'am.
Midday.
And it was a good day. My son was excited a couple days later, told me the news. But at that meeting, we have to ask that question. That's an excellent question. And I think part of the answer, I was tracking it on my blog. I watched the actual meetings because they weren't doing them in person, they were doing them on YouTube. And they were continuing to pull in this money. And my commissioner emailed me personally back and he said, Mrs. Seek, he said, this is just what we're doing right now. That was his explanation as to why we're extending an emergency beyond a reasonable time. Our community and our society was being shredded. And we sat here, we had to put up with this for all these weeks, all these months. So I think one of the areas I'm just encouraging all of y'all to do is go on that YouTube and look at the August 2020 meeting
there was, I think that, I'm just telling you, Dr. Sherry, you're running against Ezra Scott. He should answer this question. He sat on that commission, and he was, let me say something really good about Mr. Scott, is that he was one of the 3 people who voted against continuing the madness back then. And he also was the only commissioner who said, I do not support contact tracing. In my family, contact tracing is the equivalent of domestic espionage. It should not be done in America.
Well, it's only supposed to be productive the first, week of a massive, very deadly virus like,
Yeah.
was it SARS? The first one, it was traced back into like a hotel or an apartment building in a high rise. It takes, you have to nip it in the bud within like a week with the very first breakout, otherwise it's useless. And I heard people in the federal government say that, but they still let it happen.
Well, and you're hearing now, I hope you're as encouraged as I am, we're now hearing the truth come into light. These people who have been blackballed, who have said, don't do these lockdowns, you're exacerbating and drawing out a problem, that if we had allowed COVID to be COVID, I know that sounds harsh, but it would have burned itself out much quicker than now it has.
Well,
So
like
we're
Sherry,
reaping.
they're making it sound like it's 80% death rate, but it's 0.003 or something.
Right, but I have not been able to attend a commissioner meeting yet, but that's exactly what I would go with my comment. I would say, why do you continue to call this an emergency? And are you aware, sirs and madams, that it is a federal crime to receive money fraudulently when this virus is a bioweapon? This is fraudulent behavior, and I'm not happy to say it. I would love to be helpful to people who maybe just didn't know that that is the truth. But in stringing this out and hurting these children, and I have always believed the mask was precursor, it was the little ask to the big ask of that shot going in their arm.
Yeah.
And this is going to render our Christmases very black indeed if these schools start becoming vaccination centers. And is anybody concerned about what's really in the flu vaccine right now? Do we even know what's in the flu shot right now?
Do we ever
Do we
know?
know that it's
Do
not
we
the
ever
vaccine?
know?
I don't know anybody who's ever gonna get another flu
Are we
shot
gonna
left
trust
because
them?
these COVID vaccines.
So, I'm sorry to be like this black voice of doom.
No, but I think you, and so does Mary Ellen, ask some very, very valid questions that need to be answered. But I think that there needs to be a greater transparency than what there's been, and that's one of the things that when I'm in office, I will try to mandate and say, you know what, we the people have the right to know, not only where the money's going, but why are we making some of the decisions that we are? And we the people, have the right to know and the responsibility to know. Now let's take this for a second. Why this year suddenly parents looking at what are their kids learning in school? Why suddenly are we? We've not been as active as we should have been, self-included. We've kind of sat back and let it happen. Okay? We've let it happen. And suddenly to realize that yes, critical race theory is being taught in the schools. That's wrong. Why have the parents not gone to school boards and say, no, before you teach my child that, I want to look at the curriculum? Okay? That's one of the things that I want to do, is say, you know what, by the end of the school year, the curriculum needs to be ordered, and the parents have the obligation to review that before the summertime and get back to the teachers so that they can teach it, but it should be full disclosure what's being taught in the schools, and it's not. Okay?
But
Full
you know,
disclosure.
how many parents really have the time? That's the whole
Okay,
issue,
but you know what,
right?
that's what we've laid it on.
Yeah.
Okay, you wanna talk about time? I know about time, okay? I know about time, I'll go tit for tat with anybody
But
for
you know
time.
what I'm saying,
But
what
yes,
I'm
I do. But, and that's been part of why we haven't responded, but we need to respond. And why we not, I think in some ways Roe versus Wade should never be where it was. We didn't stand up. We've got to prioritize. We've got to say what is going to be the time best spent to be aware. And parents suddenly are finding the time, and God, as far as I know, didn't make another 25th hour. But we're suddenly finding that time. And if you made 25th hour for her, I wanna know why, I've been asking for that for a long time.
You know, we wanna have less law,
Yes, we do.
less legislation.
Self-governing, we are
Yeah.
self-governed people.
I mean, we don't really need that law in Michigan that just was passed for women, that you don't pay tax on menstruation. I'm sorry, I'm offended by that.
Yeah, why are they wasting time?
Yeah, I mean, of all things, but women stand up, be proud, come on.
Well, that's what I'm saying, we need to be more active than what we've been, and the people deserve answers, and government needs to be more transparent.
Yeah, for sure.
Other questions?
I got a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Why didn't they use the medical ship that was parked over there in New York? Nobody went on there to treat it. The Javits Center, medical facilities set up, nobody was in there. Why didn't New York take advantage of that?
If I was a governor and legislative people in New York, I would know. What I can tell you is what was handed down to us as grassroots physicians just working, is that initially the naval ship was not supposed to have any COVID patients on it. They were supposed to be the overflow. And they took some patients, and the patients were positive, and that's when they said, no, they're not going to do that. Whether that's truth, please hear me. I'm not validating that. When you hear something from truth from me, I'm going to have substantiated that as truth. So I can only tell you what we knew of while I was in New York City. Whether that's true or not, I cannot speak to, okay? But that again was something that I don't have the answers for. I saw the centers that were created to be hospitals. I don't know why they weren't fully used, and that's really where I thought I was going to be initially when they said, can you work in untraditional settings with chaotic environments with little supplies?
Unbelievable.
So, and I think that's a lot of what I wanna do, is make certain we don't repeat that. Make certain that we don't repeat history like that. Make certain that we don't send patients into a nursing home.
Oh my God,
And that is
Especially when you have
criminal.
Central Park and you
Yes.
the USS Comfort and the Javits Center.
Yes. That some of those things are criminal. Okay?
Yes.
And I
Why
can't
was no
say,
one prosecuted? That's another one.
that's right. I can't say some of those things that did happen, and even as I can't answer the money for the schools, but what I can tell you is I will be answering for some of those.
Yeah.
And I will be very much aware of, and like I said, I think greater transparency, less government, more we the people, greater transparency, and you have the right to know some of those things.
What gets me now is we have stopped thinking for ourselves. We are
Yes.
depending on the federal government to direct us. We cannot do that.
That's what I'm saying.
They'll put us
We
on
need to-
trains taking us to camps.
Well,
to
that's
try
why I
to
said,
re-educate
we the
us.
people need to, that's why I said, not only do we have a right to know, but we really do have a responsibility to know. We really do. And quite honestly, for many years, I took the notion, government is government, they'll do their thing, I'll do my thing, and never shall the twain meet. These past 2 years have demanded a different response from me. And I can say I've never seen the school boards and the parent meetings nearly as full as what we have. Why? We've stood up and said, excuse me, no more, no more. And you're exactly right. We should have, we could have, and if we had, we'd be at a different place than we are right now. But I don't think it's too far. And it excites me to start seeing that we, the people, are rising up and saying, no, we expect answers. We want answers, and we're going to know, and we're going to partake in and take the responsibility that we ought to know, and that we ought to do, and that we ought to be being and doing some things ourselves. Instead of taking the attitude that I did for many years. That's them, I'm here, I just carry on my life. Too many of us had that attitude.
And to that, the next Lakeshore School Board meeting is December 13th. Look at their website. You'll probably, if you wanna speak, you'll have to sign up when you go in order to speak. But please help the parents and be there. Just be there to support them.
Absolutely. Michelle, I don't know how long you wanna go, but if there's any other questions, I'll.
Yeah, however you wanna go.
Yes.
What's your stand on the Fifth Amendment?
I think we need to go back to the Constitution in itself and almost all of the amendments. Yes.
What was the question?
The Fifth Amendment, Okay, what's my stance on the Fifth Amendment? It's the same on the Second Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, Third Amendment. I think we need to get back to the Constitution. I think we need to support the Constitution. Our forefathers had great wisdom and understood that, yes, we should have freedom of speech, freedom of guns, freedom of those things that the mandates dictate, that the amendments
So
dictate.
how do you then address, the diverseness that we have of the races in America? What do you, I mean, and then someone's gonna counter you and say, well, wait a minute, that was written by the white population, and it did not include those of color. So, I'm just asking, I mean, I feel we need to come together, as you said.
We absolutely need to come together, and that's my convictions. Part of why, and some of you may have heard of the community unity services that I've been doing for the past year and a half, okay? The community unity services are a service that last year when we were setting cities on fire and tearing down statues, historical statues, and we cannot recreate history. We should learn from history and move on, okay? But last year when they were pulling down statues and setting cities on fire, it's like, wait a second, we don't even have unity in our community. You know, if I go into a church in Benton Harbor, I'm gonna be one of the only white women in there. And there's a lot of churches in St. Joe and Stevensville and the surrounding areas. If a person of color come in, they're gonna be the only black person in there. That ought not to be. Heaven ain't gonna look like that, ladies and gentlemen, okay? So during that time, I thought, how do we even bring our own community together? And I've been doing the community unity services. I've asked black pastors, and I've asked white pastors, and I've asked police to come together and speak in a common service. Didn't want to interfere with the churches, so we had the first one July of a year ago. And I realized that night with 237 people at that meeting and a bunch of people on the bluff that needed to be continuing. I didn't want to interfere with churches because I don't want to be a church, but I want to bring the people together. And what I discovered is that, so we've been doing it every single month, the last Friday of every month. The next service, because I don't want to interfere with Thanksgiving, is December the 3rd. It's in a church in Benton Harbor, Brotherhood. That's the same place that we've been passing out water for the past several weeks since the water problem in Benton Harbor. But it's bringing together the churches. It's bringing together we the people. Not the black churches, not the white churches, not the Hispanic churches, we the people. I think that's a start. And I think we need to get rid of critical race in our schools because I think that's teaching division and not unification. And not only should we look back at history to learn from history and learn from the mistakes and proceed forward. Instead, I think this is taking us back historically.
Yeah.
And I think critical race theory in schools have to be stopped.
How extensive or how severe is the water? I'm sorry, I don't read the newspaper, but how, since you're involved?
I am involved. The cities, not the township, but Benton Harbor City is being deemed impossible or unsafe to drink, to brush their teeth with, to cook with. They can shower with. The state has provided water. Every day of the week we have a different pickup site for water. And I've been a Brotherhood for the past 4 Sundays. Thank you. For the past 4 Sundays, literally handing out water. We're in the process of trying to figure out how many people and who want to be lab tested. We're looking at the most critical or the most high risk would be pregnant moms and young children to be tested for the level of lead.
How high is the lead level that they've been testing? 3 times, 5 times, 20 times?
7 times higher is what I've heard. I've been trying to get it to actually do lab testing on the days on Monday and Wednesdays. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, excuse me. And I was notified by the state on Thursday that they're gonna be using Intercare to do some of the lab lead testing, and they'll be doing overflow if the need comes after that. They also have a mobile unit, the Wayne Lab. That'll be coming down. It's the same that they used in Flint. I don't have those numbers as far as how bad. It's just, I do know that it's toxic and toxic levels. And I've heard 7, I've also heard 34% higher than what it should be.
And is there enough water?
Right now, yes. Right now, yes. It's all bottled water, so they've got to do everything cooking and
And of course,
everything.
winter's coming.
And winter's coming. Yesterday was not pleasant standing out there, handing out case after case of water as it blew and snizzled and rained and sleeted on us. But, yes, so there's different pickup sites. Other questions?
We're really well past due to get our infrastructure done. So, I mean, this should have been a long time ago, and St. Joe is doing it now because they got money, and Benton Harbor's doing it now because they got money, so it's about money. And we have to fix our infrastructure.
But the St. Joe taxpayers, our water bill went up $50 a month.
Mine hasn't yet.
Our last one did.
But you're not paying for that. The pipes being replaced, the lead pipes
But I mean,
in the city are funded by a state.
but not
grant.
100%.
Yeah, it is.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I am.
What I can tell you is that the Benton Harbor was given money many years ago to get this done.
What happened?
$5.5 million.
Several times.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Several times.
Yeah, what happened?
So whatever happens.
Wow.
Depends on
Same-
who
the
was
same-
in
the
the
same
office.
question.
It's
Who
all about
takes it?
accountability. And who's getting to do that than our congresswoman?
That's right. That's right. You know, in any business, we have to show receipts. We have to show, okay, I spent, $89 at a hotel and I spent $3 for a meal. Here's my receipts. Need to be reimbursed, and yet we can't even do that when you're given that much money on that many things. That's not okay.
That's right.
That's not okay.
That's right.
And as a
same with the
consequence,
schools.
we have people that are suffering.
If
That's
our-
exactly right.
Yeah, if
Same
our
thing on
schools aren't producing, why? You're paying these people good money, why? And if they need help, we get them help.
Exactly.
Do you have plans for how to keep in touch with your constituents?
We'll work on it.
Town
We're working.
hall meeting.
I was gonna say,
acting
so-
like you're already in the office.
Well, thank you, because I think that's right. So, one of the things that I've thought about, and they caught me up on, do I tweet and all that kind of stuff? No, okay? What I want to do is be here with you, the people, okay? Whether it be, you wanna call it town hall meetings, when I look in your eyes and I hear you and see you and understand you, then I'm gonna understand what's going on in the community, okay? I am very, very relationally oriented, and I'm a people person. I've gotta be down there, okay? And that's one of the reasons that I've taken as active as I am in Benton Harbor. Benton Harbor had nothing to do with my running for office. Benton Harbor had everything to do because we have a community, one of our communities that is in need. So I wasn't down there touting kind of, look at me, I'm running for office. I'm down there because people need some help.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing from we the people. And even though I've got a full busy schedule, I'm making the time to go and meet with the commission. Marletta Seats, I've got her phone number on me. We've been calling and, texting frequently, trying to figure out how else do we help, what else do I do? So what I wanna do is stay connected. If that means, having a town hall meeting, if that means hearing from you, I will be responsive to you. I don't think in the middle of the Benton Harbor crisis that it's okay to go toward the wineries in Paw Paw, which is what our current congressman sent out the second week after the Benton Harbor water crisis. So, how do I, and with help from you,
Right.
okay? Some of those answers, I don't know. How is it gonna be best to reach you? How's it best gonna be here from you?
Well, such as our current congressman stopped doing town hall meetings.
Yeah, nobody's doing town hall meetings because they don't want to talk to the people.
Right,
And who knows how much, hold it.
right.
Before COVID.
Okay, so, but no, how do I wanna hear from you. I wanna hear this creative, I don't have all the creativity, guys, truly, I'm a doctor, not a politician. But I do know when my patients need something, I'm responsive. You know what, I don't leave home, some of you that are patient, I don't leave home. I don't leave the office until every phone call is made for that day. Those of you that have patients can attest to that. I don't leave my office. Sometimes I'm calling at 9 o'clock at night and the patient's going, Doc, what are you still doing at the office? What are you still doing at the office? Okay, but some of that I'm gonna hear from you guys. How do you need me to do that? Other than, I really am kind of a boots on the ground kind of gal getting it done. And I'm gonna find a way to get it done. Not be held back in bureaucratic red tape and trying to figure out who's doing what and what. You know what, stop the nonsense, let's get her done. Other questions? Yes,
I have the Dr. Pierre Corey COVID-19 Care website, and also Dr. Peter McCullough, the American
McCullough,
Association of Physicians and Surgeons. And, you said that you developed a protocol, I'm sure that was for the inner city and the specifics of what you were dealing with.
Actually, go ahead.
But which of those, layouts is closest to your feeling?
So,
What do you
very,
suggest
very,
for if we get COVID positive and we want to move on early treatment?
Yes. So I was pleased to see that my treatment protocol is very, very succinct or in sync with McCullough's. And by the way, Peter McCullough is one of the world's best published cardiologists. Okay, this is a brilliant man. And when I saw his protocol, he was actually at in Berrien Springs, and I think it was by a Pioneer Church perhaps, and he spoke. But when I got a copy of his protocols, quite honestly, can I tell you something? I felt a little proud. It's like, he's doing what I've been doing. But no, very, very in line, okay? In this community, what I found is that the use of hydroxychloroquine is a little easier to get than the ivermectin.
Right.
I've had patients and heard of people going to the feed store to get their ivermectin. There's been ivermectin that's also been purchased from India. But McCullough says ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine. He uses doxycycline, I use azithromycin, but the prednisone and budesonide.
FYI, Meyer is still filling ivermectin prescriptions.
It's just much harder to get.
They just gave me 52 pills.
Great.
And that brings me to the question I was asking, because you're on the front lines of the frontline doctors. I have been shouting early treatment since last April. And people are getting sick of me talking about early treatment. But I'm the one they come to when now they're sick or their friend is sick, but when they go to the online things and they can't get through, I'm like, I don't know, but, you know. So do you have any tips?
We deal with that literally every single day. I'm getting it this weekend. I got 4 phone calls from patients that are not my patients, and believe it or not, they're across the state and across the nation. And I'm saying, guys, I can't be everybody's doctor, okay? I'm telling them to go back to their doctors, see if their doctors are willing to. If they're not, I'm stepping up to the plate and I have prescribed some. I said I can't do this without being in some sort of formal relationship with you, so let's do a telehealth, let's do something, okay? Because it is egregious and hurts my heart when I see that physicians are not doing something. But I really am trying to send patients back to their physicians. It's their physician that has a relationship with that patient, and that's really where it ought to be done. I'm trying to educate some of the physicians so that there's more of us that are willing to do that and get them educated so that they also can begin to treat. As a matter of fact, this evening when we're done, I told them I would call them. I have a meeting, telehealth meeting or telephone meeting with an ICU physician that is over in Jenison, I think. Okay,
Well,
because one of these patients called me this weekend.
I have a friend whose father-in-law died recently of COVID. He was untreated, he was vaccinated. She's vaccinated, she got it. So she went to a local walk-in clinic type of thing, and she happened to be waiting in the parking lot when the doctor came out to go to lunch, and the doctor was wondering, why are you still there? So she talked to her. And she talked to her about being able to get ivermectin, because I texted her while she was in there and said, if you can't get the monoclonal antibodies, see if she'll give you the ivermectin. But the doctor told her, we are not allowed to prescribe it. And if I do prescribe it, they could withhold my malpractice insurance, and this is Spectrum.
Wow, that is
So how does that change? She said, she told her to call you.
So, give her your name if she does call.
She did get the monoclonal antibodies.
Okay. That's a system that we need to continue to press against, continue to fight, continue to stand up and say, what's happening is not right, okay?
How
And
do you
show
do
that.
that? Are they gonna even listen?
I think numbers are powerful, and I think the mightier the more that we come, and the more that we say, and I'd say don't give up touting your touting what you're saying, continue. Grow weary not in well-doing. And is it a big system? Yes, but I think we the people can continue to push some of those things forward and continue to show some of the things that have been effective and start unburying and figuring out, uncoding some of the stuff that's going on and figuring out why. Past year I've wanted to hit my head on the wall and say, why are we doing this? I don't understand that at this point.
Well, you
But I
gotta be
think-
more frustrated than I am.
So, but I think continuing to push forward and continuing to group arms and push forward.
So you as a doctor, have you been able to convince other doctors that we need to stand together? Because like you said, numbers speak louder than words, and if everybody stands together and says, I'm prescribing this, what are they gonna do?
The numbers are growing.
Good.
The numbers are growing. And now I locally, but the numbers are growing across the state. I was at Hillsdale, a week ago, November the 4th, I was at Hillsdale, and there's a group of physicians that are actually looking at establishing a new healthcare system, as well as banning across our state and then rolling across the nation, saying.
Ladies, please.
Treat.
Good.
I have heard a little bit about
Ladies,
that.
we're trying to listen to
That's
her.
good to
I
know.
know, I'm sorry, she was
Thank
asking
you.
me what was said, and she couldn't hear.
I'm sorry.
We can't hear that.
Okay, I'll yell. Sorry.
That's great.
Anything else? Any other questions? Yes.
How protective are the antibodies?
How protective or how effective?
Either, both.
Okay, so the remdesivir has been shown to be ineffective and to have a lot of consequences and a lot of side effects, and that's the remdesivir. The other end, for simplicity's sake, I'll call it BAM-BAM. The BAM-BAM, which is the monoclonal antibodies that they're doing in dual junction, have been shown to be effective. You've got to meet certain criteria before they're used, and they're still being used, and we're seeing yet that yes, they are responsive. That's for the hospitalized patient, and early treatment again would preclude the necessity for that.
Oh wait, you said the hospital, you can't even get them when you're in the hospital.
The BAM-BAM?
The monoclonal antibodies, they do not give them neither in the emergency room or in the hospital.
Depends upon where in the hospital you're at, and I don't mean locally, but they're
Oh,
using
I'm
it.
talking about locally.
Okay.
Cause my sister-in-law went through this.
Okay, so through the infusion center, and yes, they still are using some in the hospital. There was a general medical staff meeting on it a couple weeks ago, and they're taking remdesivir off, but accessibility to get the BAM-BAM is.
Well, that is a good choice.
At Spectrum?
Because when
They're
she was.
looking at, John Froggatt said during a medical staff meeting that we're looking at taking remdesivir away and trying to
Wonderful.
I
push
can't
more.
believe they ever did it in the first place, isn't it sugar
Thank you,
loads
God, yes.
Yes, it is.
Basically, everything.
Yes, and that's what they're saying,
It never worked for anything. Of course, that's why Township wanted it out.
so. Other questions?
I just, so if you've had COVID, you have the antibodies, are you protected
Yes.
for a long time?
For a long time, how long that time is, we don't know yet, okay? But yes, and that's why people are saying if I have the antibodies, they're being exempt from the medical vaccine, if you can call it that, because yes, they have the natural immunity. And the natural immunity that you develop is 80% stronger, 80 times stronger than the vaccine would ever offer the immunity to. So yes, there's an immunity. We're too young in this whole pandemic to know how long that immunity is, but yes, you have immunity.
Yes, I even heard that the Spanish flu, 100-year-old people that survived the Spanish flu still have antibodies. They did an
Really?
autopsy, have you ever heard something like that?
I don't know, and I would question the legitimacy of that. Sorry, I don't know. So,
You hear a lot of things, you just try to
Sure.
put together the stuff that's actually.
try to put the real information. Other questions? And if not, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. I would like to introduce Zach very quickly. Come on up here, Zach, for me. Zach Borton is my campaign manager. And he, yep, so.